Doubt is a terrible thing that can cause people to do things they would otherwise avoid. Examination of Sarai's doubt and how to avoid the trouble it brought. So, today I brought 2 pitchers of water, and I have 2 soft drinks, regular and diet. And I'm going to put them, the regular in one pitcher, and then the other one in the other pitcher, and you'll see what the difference is. Regular Cola. Diet. You tell? Cola sunk, the diet floated to the top. The difference is something like this. A packet of sugar in one and not the other. So that little packet of sugar is about how much is in the can of regular soda, and the diet doesn't have any. So the sugar causes it enough weight to sink. So it doesn't take much, but when it's present, it can weigh down the whole can. In the Gospels, we're told of a night when Jesus' disciples were out on the Sea of Galilee, and they were in the midst of a terrible storm. All of a sudden, they see someone walking on the water towards them. At first, they think it's a ghost, and they cry out in fear, not realizing it was Jesus who was walking on the water. And Matthew 14 tells us that Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." "The Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. And Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw and felt the wind, he was afraid, and he began to sink, crying out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You have little faith," he said. "Why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. So what caused Peter to sink? Doubt. Yeah. Just like the sugar caused a can of pop to sink, so also doubt can cause us to sink and struggle in our faith. It doesn't take much, but when it's present, doubt can drag you down and take the joy out of your faith. So first today we're going to talk about doubt. In Genesis 16, we're introduced to a woman who's struggling with doubt. And I tell you, it's not a pretty sight. In the previous chapter, 15, we're told that God had just reassured Abram that he would have a son. Now, Abram's come home, and he's all excited. You can just picture him retelling the whole story to his wife, expecting her to be as excited as he is. But she's having no part of it. In fact, I can almost sense the fury in her voice as she tells Abraham what she thinks of this whole thing. Well, look again at the Genesis 16:2. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my maidservant. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Abram agreed to what Sarah said. This has got to be one angry woman. She's so mad, she lets loose of God, declaring, "The Lord has kept me from having children." And she gives Abram a direct order, "Go sleep with my maidservant. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Now remember, Abraham just came from a private audience with God. He's just seen God do miraculous things, and he's heard God's promise to him that he will receive the desire of his heart. But now here's Sarah cutting loose on him, and he forgets all about God. In fact, he never says another word about God. You can almost hear him as he meekly says, "Yes, dear." Whatever you say, dear. Is that her tent over there? well, I just go and over there and do what you want. Abraham's behavior kind of reminds me of a quote from Bill Crosby. I am not the boss of my house. I don't know how I lost it. I don't know when I lost it. In fact, I don't think I ever had it. Why does Sarah behave like this? Why would she be so angry with God and so belligerent toward her husband? Why? Because she is one frustrated woman. As far as we know, God never spoke to her. God only talks to this silly husband of hers. She keeps hearing, God's going to do this, and God's going to that. And in the meantime, she's over 90 and still has no children. Up till now, she's been willing to go along with all of this, but doubt has set in and it's got a hold of her. She's no longer willing to believe that she will ever have a child. She's no longer willing to meekly accept the idea that this God, her husband's, is ever going to come up through and come through with the promise he made. So she's fed up. She lost her faith in her husband. She's lost her faith in her husband's God. So she now sees doubt ruling her life. So secondly, doubt had a hold of Sarah, and it's a terrible thing to her. It's done terrible things as well. Now initially, everything works out the way she wants it to. Abraham does what she wants done. Hagar gets pregnant. A baby boy is born. Abraham will have a male offspring. You couldn't ask for anything to go smoother. But then things don't go so smoothly. Hagar, her trusted and faithful servant, begins to think to herself, you know, I'm pregnant. Sarah isn't. I deserve to be treated like a princess here, not like a slave. So she begins to say things around Sarah that are not quite respectful. In fact, maybe she begins to get a little catty. In fact, maybe she starts getting romantic with Abraham, reaching out for his hand once in a while, when she doesn't think Sarah's looking. I don't know. All I do know is that whatever Hagar was doing, Scripture says she began to despise her mistress. So how does Sarah respond? Well, if we look at Genesis 16, 5 and 6, then Sarah said to Abram, you are responsible for the wrong that I am suffering. I put my servant in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. Your servant is in your hands, Abram said. Do with her whatever you think best. Then Sarah mistreated Hagar, and so she fled from her. So consider the consequences that doubt has brought into Sarah's life. First, she sows discord in her family, harassing Abraham into sleeping with Hagar. Second, her anger causes her to make false accusations against the people she loves. It's your fault. 3, she creates problems in her relationship, Hagar's haughtiness. And she now, as her anger is so that it's out of control, that she sins against Hagar, mistreating her, and she drives her away. Sarah's doubt began because she was unhappy, but then the result of her doubt drove her to even deeper unhappiness. And she ends up being a person who's not very nice to be around. Billy Sunday once said, if there's no joy in your Christianity, there's a leak somewhere in your faith. And he was right. Doubt puts a leak in your faith. Doubt ultimately robs you of your joy. Like that sugar in the can of pop, doubt drags you down and it puts you under. That's why James 1:6 tells us, believe and no doubt, because he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. Then thirdly, now, there's a passage of Scripture I don't think I've ever seen or looked at that much till I prepared this. Jude 1:22. So what does it say? Be merciful to those who doubt. In the Gospels, right after Jesus came down from what they call Mount of Transfiguration with Peter, James, and John, he finds the other disciples are having a problem. A man has brought his son to them to be healed, and Jesus has given them power to heal. But this boy is different. A powerful demonic force has control of him, and the disciples can't seem to heal him. The father tells Jesus, "Teacher, I brought you my son who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." That's found in Mark 9. Then Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" "From childhood," he answered. "He has often thrown himself into fire or water to kill him. But if you can't do anything, take pity on us." "If you can," said Jesus, "everything is possible for him who believes." Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." What's the father saying? He's saying, "I believe, but I've got to admit there's a doubt gnawing at my heart, and I don't know what to do about it. This has gone on for so long, I'm not sure what I believe anymore." And Jesus does not rebuke this man. Jesus does not turn his back on the child. No, he heals the boy and restores him to his father. Now I'm telling this so that you might understand every Christian at one time or another is going to struggle in their faith. I dare say that everyone here has either or will or has experienced doubt, maybe more than once. And I want you to realize that God is merciful for those who doubt. He understands when we struggle with our faith. But we must remember, doubt is not a healthy thing. It hurts you and I. It drags us down. It robs us of our happiness. You don't want doubt in your life. So fourthly, what are you and I going to do about it? I don't think we can avoid experiencing doubt sometimes or another in our lives. But there are ways we can avoid having doubt get the better of us. There are things that we can do to stop doubt from damaging our hearts and our lives. First, be careful who you listen to. I don't know who Sarah might have been listening to, but I suspect she didn't come up with this idea of getting Hagar pregnant all by herself. I think somebody put that idea into her head. And I think whoever she's been listening to has been feeding her their doubts and feeding on her doubts. There are people out there who do not believe in your and my God. Or they may say they believe in God, but they don't really have much faith in Him. And they'll tell you things based on their lack of faith. There are people out there who are more than willing to share their doubts with you. And at times they'll sound very, very convincing. And they'll raise questions that you may find hard to answer. So if you're struggling with any kind of doubt, these people can decimate your faith. David wrote in Psalm 1, "Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stands in the way of sinners, or sits in the seat of mockers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law they meditate day and night. He's like a tree planted by a stream of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever does prosper." Psalm 1, 1-3. So what's David saying? He's saying be careful who you hang out with. Don't listen to the counsel of wicked people. Don't stand around with sinners and get their view of right and wrong. Don't sit down with people who mock the things of God. You're not going to find wisdom there. All you're going to find is doubt and destruction. But now, by contrast, if you spend your time with God and His Word, if you let that direct your thinking, David tells us that then you will enjoy life and everything you touch will prosper. Secondly, realize that defeating doubt is often a matter of deciding to believe. Years ago, when a pastor was up in northern Michigan, he was waiting for some friends to arrive at an isolated beach outside of the city of Sault Ste. Marie. The pastor was bored and decided that since the lake wasn't that big, he'd swim across the other shore and back. When he got out to the middle of the lake, then all of a sudden, it occurred to him, I'm out here alone. There's no one else here but me. If I were to drown, they might not find my body for a while. I might just sink to the bottom of this lake and they'd have to bring in skin divers to find me. And from that one small thought, that one small doubt, fear got a hold of him. And he began to panic. His swimming strokes that had been fairly smooth up to then suddenly became choppy, and he struggled to stay afloat. The pastor very well could have drowned out there, not because the water was deep, but because he began to doubt. He didn't drown, but why didn't he? The pastor didn't drown because he realized that the reason he was panicking was because his mind was dwelling on doubt. And his doubt was focusing on the isolation of being in that lake, and the depth of the lake, and the distance to the other side, and on and on and on. If he was going to survive, he had to make up his mind